Hey guys, welcome to MMA This Week. I'm your host, Dan the Wolfman. Sorry it has been so long since I've done that, but stay tuned today because I'm going to be dropping the boom on estrogen blockers and steroids and teaching you all about it so you can understand what's going on with this Jon Jones failed test and the Brock Lesnar failed tests. So guys, I'm going to be breaking it down, but let's stay positive in the beginning of this. We got UFC on Fox coming up. We got Pancrase 279 coming up this weekend. Now, Pancrase 279, guys, we got UFC veteran Yushin Okami is coming into the cage to take on former KOP champion Shingo Suzuki, who just lost his title. We have two title fights. We got current champ Ishiwatari taking on UFC veteran Jonathan Brookins in their second fight, and Brookins actually won the first fight. And we at flyweight, we got the always groovy and very interesting dude Yuki Yasunaga taking on the Neo Samurai Ryuichi Miki. Besides that, UFC vet, longtime Pancrase standout Rin Nakai, who always fought at 135 pounds, even though she's very short, and even against current, former champion Miesha Tate. She actually took Miesha Tate's back in the second and the third round and won the third round, in my opinion, and one of the judges' opinion. But she was always way too short for the weight class. We're going to see Rin Nakai going down to 125. That's late in the Western Hemisphere. Pancrase 279. That will be this Saturday after UFC on Fox 20. If you're in the Eastern Hemisphere of Japan, the Pancrase card is on Sunday. But basically, stay up late, watch UFC on Fox 20, and UFC on Fox 20, that should be interesting as well. We got Holly Holm taking on Shevchenko in the main event, and Gilbert Melendez is back after his year suspension for for having synthetic testosterone in his system, taking on Edson Barboza. So that one should be great. I'm excited to see Gil Melendez back. So basically, guys, it's all on the news. Everyone's seen it. I decided to follow this up just a couple days after I did my long 22-minute interview with Chael Sonnen, and we got into this a little bit, and I kind of hinted at some of the stuff I thought it might be. I was talking a lot about Clomid and either tamoxifen or Novadex, basically the same name. Those are the two main SERMs, and lo and behold, that is what one of the two drugs that Jon Jones tested positive for. So we're going to break that down. We're going to talk about SERMs and AIs. Jon Jones tested positive for one SERM, and that's Clomid, as you see up here, Clomiphene, as you see right there on the box, metabolite, he tested positive for, as well as testing positive for an AI. Now, guys, Clomid or another drug, Novadex, or tamoxifen, if you want to call it that, those are SERMs, okay, which are selective estrogen receptor modulators. Selective estrogen receptive modulators. Those are SERMs. And what SERMs are used is usually that is used PCT, okay, that's post-cycle therapy, which means after a cycle of anabolic steroids, testosterone, synthetic testosterone, or plenty of what is more referred to as steroids. Okay, so usually, guys, anyone that does a cycle of steroids, even if it's a baby first cycle of anabolic abuse, you should be doing PCT. And in PCT, you either use a SERM or an AI. An AI is a aromatase inhibitor, or you use both. Or you use both plus HCG, which I'll get into later, perhaps. But Jon Jones tested positive for this SERM, Clomiphene, or Clomid, as it's often known, and or marketed as, and the AI, aromatase inhibitor, letrozole, which is very interesting, guys, and we'll talk more about that as I get into this. So stay with me. Guys, you usually use those PCT. The reason you use those is, a man uses those, unless if he happens to have breast cancer, is after a cycle of steroids. Okay, that is the reason you use it, to block your estrogen, to control your estrogen from going way too high from the exogenous testosterone or steroids that you put in your system. Your testosterone shoots way high, your body compensates and elevates the estradiol or estrogen levels, and you need to combat that after a cycle of steroids, which is usually like 12 or more weeks. guys do cycles, or you could be on TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, or you could be basically what I think a lot of fighters are doing is sort of TRT known as blast cruising. And I'll get more into that later. So, guys, clomiphene has been used a lot. Clomiphene is one of the 5 banned substances that Chael Sonnen actually tested positive for. Clomiphene or Clomid is, let me see my notes here, is something some people are reporting is also what Brock Lesnar tested positive for, but I want to say they're just reporting that. That is in no way, shape, or form solid, in my opinion, nor should that be taken as solid, in my opinion. So be that as it may. Now, on clomiphene, guys, or all these drugs, these SERMs and these AIs, that's because you did other stuff, usually. But people have learned in the last few years, okay, it's not like, well, he just had that in his system. Maybe he just has bitch tits, okay, or gynecomastia, which we've seen quite a few fighters have very, very bad. They're tweaking those big nipples. I wonder why. Anyway, guys, so you know my background. I've been involved in MMA since it was NHB for 19 and a half, almost 20 years. Been training martial arts 30 years, been training MMA kind of like 22 years, hardcore like 19 and a half years MMA, grappling, catch wrestling, stuff like that. I've been in a lot of camps. I've been around a lot of fighters. I've actually sparred and rolled with probably 200, 300, 400 UFC fighters. If you put IFL, Strikeforce, Bellator, and stuff on top of that, probably more fighters than anyone else, even current fighters, because I've moved around and changed so many camps and been here and been there, especially American and Japanese fighters. So, you know my background. The clomiphene, you can take and do what's called monotherapy, or actually it would be ditherapy. So let's just say John Jones only had these 2 drugs in his system, no matter how they got there. Okay, no matter how they got into his system. Let's say he was on that system. Do they just block estrogen? No, they do not just block estrogen in effect. By blocking estrogen, you artificially raise your testosterone, and by blocking feedback loops and stuff, and it gets very, very technical. Yes, you can actually just do one or both of those drugs. Just a SERM or just an AI or just HCG, monotherapy. You could just do one of those. But if you're doing both of those, you could just be doing those and not testosterone or not Winstrol or not any other steroids. And you could be totally raising your testosterone. So just know that. It's not necessarily the case, but people are on just Clomid therapy or just tamoxifen or Novadex therapy. And you can totally raise your testosterone levels. You could just be on Arimidex, one of the much lesser AIs, more common AIs, aromatase inhibitors than what John Jones had in his system, and you can raise your testosterone. In fact, some reports and studies say that if you were only on letrozole, you could increase your testosterone 50%, 100%, 2 times to 4 times your normal testosterone levels just by that AI alone. I like John Jones. I'm just trying to put some facts out there. I decided to do this, especially after I heard Chael talking to Malky today on his podcast. Hopefully Chael will have me on his podcast, guys. If you like my interview with Chael, message him, tweet him, hit him up. Maybe he'll put me as a second guest. I'm not the hugest name, but I'm kind of a name, and I could talk about old NHB days and what it was like to fight a UFC veteran for $200, guy that fought for the light heavyweight title, or fight another guy that fought for the light heavyweight title for just $1,000. I can talk about those things, and I can talk about some of the funny stories and stuff, and being naive back then and not understanding these guys that I was training with. Were quite a few of them were obviously on stuff, and I didn't realize it at the time and stuff like that. So, Clomid, these are anti-estrogen drugs. Again, they are off-label for PCT, off-label for controlling men's hypogonadism and gynecomastia, but they're used for breast cancer patients, usually for women, to control or monitor or keep in check or help defeat breast cancer. Okay, so that's what they're used for. Men use them PCT, like I said, or for monotherapy, or I guess you could call dye therapy, which you could totally do. Is it possible that, in my opinion, now this is just my opinion, Jon Jones, Brock Lesnar, and anyone else is entitled to their defense, is entitled to get their side of the story out there, and everything else. But we've all heard some of these stories and tainted supplement defense before and stuff like that, guys. In my opinion, could Clomid be, even though it's never been in a tainted supplement, mind you, that's been reported, people have been looking that up. I believe it's never been in a tainted supplement. There's no reason estrogen blocker would be in a tainted supplement. Could Clomid possibly be in a tainted supplement from China or otherwise? Yes, it could be. It could be on the same production line. It could possibly happen. There is a possibility of that. Now, let me talk about, I think I talked about SERMs pretty good. Guys, when you do a heavy cycle, medium to heavy cycle, a lot of guys use AIs, aromatase inhibitors, like the letrozole or Arimidex, also known as anastrozole, during cycle, as well as PCT. So they'll take a little bit, like 0.25 milligrams, or I'm sorry, 25 milligrams of Dex or Arimidex per week or twice per week. That controls most people on a medium to heavy cycle. And I'm not a doctor, so please let me have a disclaimer here. Don't sue me. This is what people do. Doing stuff without doctor supervision, anyone watching this is not an advice to do anything illegal or dangerous, and can be extremely dangerous to the body. And I'll get into that in a second. Guys, they can use the AI both during and after the cycle. Usually guys use a SERM just after cycle. But guys do all kinds of funny things. You can even mix that up. So anyway, could Clomid possibly be there? Yeah, could possibly. Would there be any reason to put an estrogen blocker in? No. Do people suddenly want drops in estrogen? No. Sudden drops in estrogen is not good unless you have extreme overestrogen for either extremely rare, weird genetic reasons, which I myself am an aromatase inhibitor. I'm a high aromatizer. I do have high estrogen naturally. Instead of like 30, mine's like 56. Okay, like high 20s, low 30s. That's kind of ideal for men. Naturally, I have that. Okay, without using anything. But if you do a major cycle, your estrogen goes way higher. Anyway, you don't want it crashing. If you're not really high for a reason, you do not want a sudden crash in estrogen, which any so-called estrogen blocker can do, which is a SERM or an AI. Okay. Now an AI, same thing. Arimidex is the most common one. Aromacin's the second common one. It used to be more common. And the third, more rare, is letrozole. Letrozole is the one that Jon Jones tested positive for. 2 drugs, 1 AI, 1 SERM. This was the AI he tested positive for. A lot of guys, I'm sure fighters, have used Clomid, guys. A lot of bodybuilders and amateur wannabe bodybuilders and people all over the world have used Clomid or Novadex, which, by the way, based on research and everything that I know about it, Novadex is way better than Clomid, and all the guys that I've looked up their suspensions, it looked like people were on the clomiphene, not Novadex, which is very strange to me based on what I know. Maybe you guys know something about hiding it long term or how long it stays in your system. Now, Clomid looks like it stays 4 to 11 or 12 weeks in your system. That depends on fat and what kind of athlete you are and genetics and all kinds of factors, right? So guys in the UFC, like a Jon Jones, is going to stay in their system less than a guy like me or Tim Sylvia or Big Country Roy Nelson. Nelson never popped, but Tim Sylvia did. If you're a fatter guy, higher body fat percentage, it's going to stay in the fat cells. And then when you lose weight, something from a year ago or 6 months ago or 3 months ago, depending on what it is, could still be in those fat cells. And as you burn off that fat, whoa, there's that chemical, baby. That's kind of how it works. Typically, Clomid can stay in your system, from what I've researched, for 4 to 11 or 12 weeks. Letrozole, I'm not sure about. Letrozole is much stronger than the more common stuff like Arimidex or Aromacin. Letrozole is very, 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 very strong. It kills estrogen. You could be estrogen like 70 and you take a bit of letrozole and within 3 days of a loading, you're boom, from what I researched, you're like way down. You could overshoot it, and that's a very bad thing. So talking about overshooting. Letrozole has a very strong, bad metallic taste. You can look all this up. It's on all kinds of things. Women complain about it that have been put on it, that have breast cancer, okay, and they have to figure out how to get rid of the bad taste in their mouth. Now, when your estrogen crashes, guys, you can act crazy and be crying and all kinds of problems. That's when women go through menopause. Their estrogen's crashing. They don't have enough estrogen anymore. In fact, most women should probably be on estrogen at old age, just like most men should be on TRT or testosterone replacement therapy or estrogen therapy for women. Most people should be, in my opinion. And modern doctors that really know this stuff, and very few do, you should be probably. But anyway, imagine a woman going through menopause. That's the kind of stuff that happens when your estrogen crashes, right? So it's basically flu-like symptoms. Horrible. You're going to be perhaps vomiting, black dark stools and explosive diarrhea. You're going to be red and have a fever and sweats. Your bones are going to ache, arthritis-like symptoms. It is just nasty. So even something that moderately over 5, 6, 7, 8 days can crash if you're taking it every day, like a SERM. Letrozole is way stronger than that, okay? So let's say Dan knew a guy that accidentally, when he moved to another country and he bought stuff legally and he was legally on TRT in his home country, and there you could buy everything over the counter legally, to control estrogen, had gotten some tamoxifen or Nolvadex, okay, which is very similar to Clomid. And let's say that person accidentally took those pills, mistaken those pills for some other, medications that he was supposed to be taking, and accidentally took that medication for 7, 8 days straight. Just that medication. Now, letrozole is a lot stronger than that. In even moderate, the slimmest doses, you would crash and feel horrible, and this person felt horrible and had diarrhea and had fever and thought, because of the third world country they were in, that they caught something horrible like dengue fever or something horrible, nasty, hepatitis from the food, even though had vaccinated shots. And black explosive shits and sweating and fever and headache and dizziness. That's the kind of stuff that happens from just minorly crashing your estrogen. Okay, that's like from 20 milligram pills of tamoxifen, or a Clomid equivalent would be, I think it's a 4-to-1 ratio. So Clomid like 50 milligrams, I'm guessing, because that's a common thing right there on the box. Or 5 milligrams of tamoxifen is basically equivalent to 20 milligrams of Clomid, is the ratio that I know. I believe that's right. Again, guys, don't take anything as medical advice. This is simply an MMA blog. Anyway, guys, understand this. If you had letrozole, if you were taking it accidentally in a supplement, number one, it would taste really bad. Number two, within 2 days, usually the next day, I feel even a slight drop, and other people feel a decent drop in estrogen. Definitely by the third day of perhaps taking this in a tainted supplement, or if you, for whatever reason, were mixing your drug and whatever, you would notice the bad taste and you would notice the flu-like symptoms. Within 7 days, you'd probably be in a hospital dying. If you accidentally took letrozole in any kind of amount, you would be feeling like you would be dying, unless if you were so high, you knew exactly how much to take because you were coming off a super high cycle of anabolic steroids. That is my opinion and my research, and I believe it is backed up if you look at it. People on a cycle of steroids, it's only recommended by people that have experimented with this extensively that you should only be on 0.36 milligrams to maybe 1.25 at the high end on an extremely high cycle, 1.25 milligrams of letrozole. Okay. Most pills of stuff you can get in medicines are usually 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams. So 1.25 milligrams or 0.36 milligrams is such the tiniest, probably like pencil mark amount. Okay, and if that's how much you're supposed to be taking for a PCT if you were doing an extreme cycle, imagine like if you just took, a bit of that mixed in with something you were taking every day in your shake. You would crash hard, and crashing hard is not a good thing. You could die. You would feel like you're dying very fast, and you'd be getting yourself to an emergency room. So, Keep my story in mind of, and that's just a low amount that some people even do in monotherapies, of how much estrogen can crash and what it makes you feel like. Guys, it's dangerous stuff to play with this if you don't know this stuff, okay? So, what do I think? You know, John Jones deserves his time in court. I like John Jones. He's going to hate me now. Malky, John Jones. Just putting it the way things are. How do I say this another way? To accidentally, perhaps, have a SERM or an AI, even though it's never happened and there's no reason to put it in a supplement, really, show up in a supplement could possibly happen. Things that have showed up in supplements that could happen are stuff that are testosterone boosters more than the amount that a small amount of a Clomid would do, okay? A small amount would raise your testosterone, but not much compared to testosterone boosters that some shady companies, it's not regulated well, do put in supplements. So let's keep aware of that. Could one of those possibly be in either a SERM or an AI? Yeah, I could buy that, and I believe the law system would buy that. Could both a SERM and an AI, and the SERM is the most extreme, most effective, and the lowest possible dose for an extreme cycle AI, and the SERM be in the same supplement, and that happens to be the two things that you need for an extreme PCT after an extreme cycle, like if you took time off and you were doing extreme powerlifting and suddenly put on 20 pounds of lean muscle mass and we're putting pictures everywhere. Just saying, it's not likely, and I don't think anyone's going to buy that it's likely both showed up. It just happened to show up to the one thing a professional athlete wants after a cycle of steroids. Or even, again, those two together, we don't know the amounts, those two together could definitely raise your testosterone. You couldn't do a high amount of the letrozole for long, but I'm sure people could figure out, like, if you do this for 5 days plus this steadily, the Clomid steadily, could you raise your testosterone quite a bit? Oh, yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. So even without testosterone / steroids / Dynabol / whatever else. Okay, guys. So keep that in mind. He deserves his time figuring it out. Certainly, even if he did take something or someone purposely gave him something, or he didn't want to think about it, whatever, certainly isn't the first and certainly won't be the last. And I'm telling you, if 30 people have been caught, it's probably something like that over the years. The number's a lot higher, okay, than guys who haven't been caught. Okay, let's move on to Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar failed. He failed both his tests before the fight and for the same substance. The same substance was found on fight night. Okay, in competition and out of competition. Same substance. What that substance is has not been officially reported as far as I know. That is, of course, up to USADA and more likely the Nevada State Athletic Commission. It is being reported originally by the LA Times in a tweet. I think that's a weird place to report something, but maybe I'm just not up to date as a journalist. Supposedly one person, a source, told them that. Then it also got reported by ESPN. ESPN said multiple sources. Now, could that be true? Could that be good journalism on their part? Yeah, that could be. That Brock tested for the same substance, clomiphene, that you see up there. Supposedly Brock tested for the same thing that John Jones has, that Chael Sonnen has, that other people have, Clomid or clomiphene metabolites. Until that's announced officially, whoever has that right to do that first, whether that's USADA or I believe the NSAC, until that's official, I don't really buy that. And if someone in any place of authority to really know that, other than hearsay in maybe Brock's camp or something, but if someone is releasing information like that, who is a tester for USADA, or someone at USADA, or someone at NSAC, or someone that overheard that works for the UFC perhaps at NSAC, if anyone like that in a position of authority leaks that information before the official overseeing organization is supposed to release that, then that is a huge violation of rights, in my opinion. I mean, HIPAA laws are supposed to protect an individual. Now, of course, fighters have to put in their contracts and contracts that they understand USADA testing, which maybe didn't happen at first. They have to sign away that they're willing to get tested. I understand that, and that's a tricky area, and that's giving away rights. But nothing should be announced until it's supposed to officially be announced by whatever USADA or the Athletic Commission decides. That should not be coming from hearsay. That should not be coming from a source. If a source is a legitimate source, the source shouldn't be doing that. The source shouldn't be saying that. So what I'm saying is, at this point, you can maybe perhaps judge John Jones a little bit, but wait to see what he says versus Brock Lesnar. You assume based on his physique and whatnot. But until it's announced that it was Clomid, I wouldn't say it's Clomid. Okay, personally, I think it would have made more sense if we found testosterone suspension in his system. According to reports, he got tested 5 or 6 times, 5 or 6, depending on the report, times he passed leading up to the fight, and then failed, I think, 11 days out before the fight, and then failed fight night, we just found out. So failed 2 tests for the same substance. Could be testosterone suspension. Guys, you hear testosterone cypionate in the U.S. That stays in your system 3 months. Testosterone suspension stays 4 to 12 hours. In my years of MMA, I heard of a very famous fighter from a pretty reliable source, back when testing was way more lenient, would inject, right after he weighed in, into his leg, testosterone suspension. By the time he was probably tested fight night or after fight, it's already out of the system to someone who's leaned out and cutting weight and doesn't have any fat left and is at 7% body fat. So, it's probably not at 12 hours. Me, it'd probably be in there for 15, 25 hours. That's how drugs in your system work. So if you're cutting weight and you're low on fat, I believe this science makes sense. Brock, it could be something not even, it could be, who knows, it could be he took pseudoephedrine, which some guys could use for cheating, but I think one of my friends never popped before. It's from a country that, from Japan, where most guys never pop, and the 3 substances were all something you would find in cold medicine that he probably bought in America. I believe that. Could it be used for weight cutting and stimulant reasons to have energy in a fight? Yeah, that's why it's a banned substance. But mistakes happen, and so we probably shouldn't judge Brock yet. Do I think Brock's used in his past? Looking at photos of him his whole life since 18, once he suddenly blew up at 18 through his career? Very possible. Very possible. Did he maybe cut a lot of it out and obviously passed 5 or 6 tests before fighting in the UFC? Very possible. Could it be something he defends it? That has a good reason. Very possible. Could it be fighters cut stuff out of their system for a fight, and then 2 weeks out from the fight, they start getting fear and scare? Oh my God, what if I don't perform? What if I look like an ass on a huge stage like UFC 200 or just in the UFC in general on a huge stage, and I'm going to get embarrassed, I'm going to lose money, and I'm going to lose sponsors, and I'm going to look bad, and I won't be able to, in his case, be pushed as hard in the WWE? Who knows? Fear is a human thing, and so guys might even try and do right. And sometimes they take steroids or testosterone or whatever, or a Clomid or something to get over that hump. They get scared right before a fight, or they do it when they're downtime off of a fight because of injuries, or because they want to bulk up in muscle in the downtime because of an injury, or both. So you see a lot of that, in my opinion. Like if a guy hasn't fought in a year and he got put on an awful lot of muscle mass in those first 6 months of his suspension or whatever, or was time off for his injury, did he do stuff? Raising your testosterone could probably help you. Certainly other drugs do, like Deca, but Deca stays in your system for a year, so fighters are smart and bodybuilders to stay away from that. Can that help heal injuries? Yeah. But can you definitely, if your knees hurt, can you be doing shoulder presses and putting on muscle mass that helps you in your fight career? Yes, so keep an eye on that. A little bit, guys. I know I'm rambling on, but I want to tell you, what is cycling? What is proper TRT? What is blast cruising? Okay, most people, you hear cycles or cycling. That's a cycle of steroids for 12 to 15 weeks. You do a whole buttload, and then you come off of it, and you do post-cycle therapy for I think 10 weeks of the AIs and the serums, and usually nowadays a lot of guys add HCG which is basically something dried out from women's pee-pee, pregnant women's pee-pee, and it tells your testes to start working again, get those balls working again, get the boys working again, is what people refer to that as. Do guys cycle in MMA? Yeah, absolutely. They always have, they always will, especially if they know they're not going to fight in a while or something like that. Or they lost really bad because the other guy overpowered him because that guy was juiced but he didn't get caught. And then guys that maybe never juiced, you've seen this in a couple of instances, all of a sudden, those guys went on a huge cycle and got popped. If you look at Royce Gracie and you look at Matyushenko, look at their loss before the fight that they got popped with. Did they get manhandled and ragdolled by someone that perhaps was on was on steroids or was during the TRT era, given a TUE exemption for testosterone replacement therapy? Yeah. And then they go, so maybe even guys that were like good people and didn't want to cheat, and then they get fucking crushed. Do they then sometimes go? I think if you look at what happened to Royce Gracie, perhaps if you look at what happened to Alexander Semenko, he cheated really bad, obviously. I think if you look at his 50-to-1 TDE ratio and what he tested positive for and stuff. But, and obviously physically looking at him compared to his previous fight. Not saying that necessarily, at one point Matt Hughes had an exemption. Tito's never popped, but he was a weight class above in a huge light heavyweight versus 185 or so. Semenko was manhandled. I'm just saying fighters do stuff for different reasons. Maybe they want to look better and not get made fun of for being fat. Some of that is truth to a guy like Tim Sylvia. Maybe you just got manhandled like Semenko or Royce Gracie, and you go, oh my God, this is an evil playing field. And then they do it because a lot of other people are doing it. So it's a trickle-down effect, I guess is what I'm saying. There's steroids other than testosterone. Testosterone is a natural thing. Your body makes it. That's the male hormone. Women have it too, but that's the male hormone. Exogenous testosterone means outside the body. Guys were allowed to do that for quite a while, either through an exemption, TUE exemption, or just the way they were testing it. Were they really doing the blood test, the CRE test that actually test for that? No, I don't think they were. Were they allowing the TE ratio that's usually like 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, and yet Vegas allows 6-to-1, some other states allow only 4-to-1. Vegas was already giving leeway for a long time. I don't think they do that anymore. Vegas was already giving a leeway, a 6-to-1 T to E ratio. Okay, testosterone to epitestosterone. Guys have tested 12. Guys have been suspended 19.5 and 20-to-1, and Semenko 50-to-1. There's been some huge T to E ratios out there that guys have popped for now for having extra testosterone. I don't know if they still keep that TE ratio thing or not, based on the fact that Gilbert Melendez was busted, I believe, for exogenous testosterone, for having synthetic testosterone in his system, not necessarily for elevated levels. I believe that not elevated levels like total testosterone number, but because of the TD, maybe the TDE ratio, but from what I read, it sounds like just because they found synthetic testosterone in the system, they did the new better test. Like sometimes they are. I think at least USADA is testing for doing the better test that can do that, and of course urine and blood, and figuring out exactly what's in the system. Interesting guys, both on like steroids, not testosterone steroids, even though testosterone is considered a steroid, and like other anadrones and destalone, anything that ends in alone, the bad stuff supposedly, both in that and the guys that have just tested pops for high TE ratios or just for having synthetic testosterone in their system, which I think, even though I don't think they often test for it, I believe now they're saying that's a legal one. Before, I think they were letting people slide with that as long as you were under the TE ratio of 6-to-1, when usually it's like 2-to-1, 3-to-1, most athletes 4-to-1, 6-to-1's a big giveaway. You certainly are not supposed to be 12-to-1. Like multiple people have tested positive for, or 20-to-1 or 50-to-1, like I've talked about. The TRT guys were allowed TUEs, therapeutic use exemptions, to be on testosterone replacement therapy. Interesting, guys, I was saying, there's more losses than wins. When people have popped and you looked at the fights they popped in, more losses than wins, by far, actually, for both other steroids and just for elevated testosterone. both more losses than wins. So guys out there, fighters out there, keep that in mind. Perhaps they're gassing, perhaps, getting injuries, stuff like that. Or just mentally feeling like you need to cheat and being worried about cheating, and so you're not thinking about the fight. Who knows? But look at the stats. Maybe it's not so good after all. Talking about other drugs, a lot of guys in the early days were popping for Winstrol, Stanozol, sorry, Winstrol basically. A lot of guys pop for that. In my opinion, nowadays, that's horrible for MMA. That's horrible for grappling. It dries out your tendons. So yeah, you're stronger. You have stronger grip strength or ligament strength. It dries out your tendons and ligaments. Hence, you also have way more injuries. So doing Winstrol, if you're in sports, is just dumb. It's the opposite of DECA. DECA adds fluid to your system. Okay, increases cellular volume, can help heal knee surgeries and stuff. DECA is prescribed when you have ACL, MCL surgery, stuff like that, a lot of times. Winstrol dries it out. A lot of guys pop for Winstrol. It does make you lean, ripped. You can get to a weight class and be ridiculously strong. I've obviously trained with a lot of guys that I know were on Winstrol that told me, or later they popped for it and stuff like that. They're lean and they're ripped, and you could be really strong at the weight class. Nowadays, I think smarter people probably doing another bad drug they shouldn't be doing, Anavar. I've even heard some people around the sport do Anavar. I don't know if there's any bad side effects to that other than getting popped for it. It stays in your system. But apparently that gives you ridiculous strength. I don't think it gives you the potential for injury that Winstrol does. Guys, people have tested, I think 3 people, T-Bow, Ali Bagnatov, and Chael Sonnen, popped for EPO. Chael popped for 5 different things. I've also had another pro fighter who's still a top pro fighter. He told me he takes EPO. He says he has a medical reason for it. What is it when women need to eat steak and liver and stuff because they're anemic? So I think he was anemic. I might have a legitimate reason, but obviously taking EPO increases your red blood cell volume. So you have more red blood cells, you have more oxygen, it increases your endurance. We know that from cycling, and guys, I think there are a lot more guys in the sport or MMA are doing it. And just they can't. I guess they're starting to test for it, but the fluctuation between low and high is so much that it's hard to establish. I wonder if what they're establishing the ranges at. To say guys are definitely taking it, guys, I've heard a lot about blood doping, that guys used to weigh in and take nurses with them. They're always taking nurses with them to the fights, and they were blood doping not only to get more blood cells, red blood cells, to get more oxygen, to get more endurance, but because literally taking that much blood, I think you take 1.5 or 1 pound or maybe 2.2 pounds. I don't know. 1 pint. They were taking up to 2 pints of blood out of their body, being totally weakened by that, not just the weight cut, and adding that blood back in. So it was artificially their own blood decreasing their weight, and then boom, super loading it. You got more blood cells. So that may still be a problem, but now with the IV ban, that's something the IV ban probably is helping with, as well as the fact that IVs flush steroids out of your system by super hydrating you. My suggestion. This is my suggestion for a long time. I put it on forums before, guys. Instead of the super strict anti-steroid policy, and people are always going to get around it, I say nothing should be allowed except for synthetic testosterone. Did I say that? Yeah, I just said that. I said nothing should be allowed except for synthetic testosterone. Now, instead of these $3.5 million a year tests, a simple total testosterone test is like $60. I'm sure if you do it for 600 guys on a roster, say 9 to 12 times a year with random testing, and you average it out, you pay for in advance, you work out a price, you probably get it down a bulk price way lower than that. Say, hey, if you test guys randomly, and definitely obviously a month out from a fight and a week out from a fight and fight night after the fight, $60 test, even lower than that probably, test their total testosterone. As long as your total testosterone numbers are just at the top of range, not super physiological, meaning above the top of total range. And ranges are anywhere 827, 850, 1100, depending on the hospital, depending on where the testing facility is, what standards they use, the range. Okay, it's 200 to 300 to 827, or like 330 to like 1100. My opinion, guys should be able to be at 110% of top of range. They should be slightly super physiological. The demands of training in MMA are ridiculous. It's not just to be the bigger, baddest ass on fight night, but to be able to train, to get your skills in, to get all your strength and conditioning and do everything in during camp and during off season, which there really is no off season, but even if you don't have a fight scheduled. And why do I not just say top of range? I say 110% because there can be fluctuations for who knows, all kinds of reasons. We don't know everything, but we do know things like sleep, masturbation, sex, I suppose even diet. Stuff like this could fluctuate you. So I say 110% max, whatever range you're going to use. So let's say hypothetically they use a testing facility that the top of range is 1,000. I say UFC fighters, MMA fighters should be able to be at 1,100. That way, if they're slightly off, whatever, but as long as you're testing them randomly and testing them often, and I'd proposed long ago how cheap it would be for major organizations like the UFC to test 9 times a month, or 9 times a year at minimum, and test everyone 9 to 12 times a year at minimum, total testosterone. If you're getting your total testosterone tested, it doesn't matter if it's HCG, Clomid, a SERM, an AI, a steroid, a testosterone, it doesn't matter what it is. As long, in any of those, if you're using them to hyperaccelerate your testosterone, it's going to show. It doesn't matter what it is. So then if you pop it over, let's say my and what I said, over 1,100, if the top range is 1,000, we agree, let's give him 110% just in case. Just in case he's a compulsive masturbator, or whatever. He has a lot of sex, which a lot of fighters do. 1,100, okay. So each fighter is going to be a little different how much they take. To get to the top of the range, you really only need most people only need about 130 to 150 milligrams. A lot of people out there bodybuilding do 200 milligrams. Real bodybuilders, the big guys at the gym, do 500 milligrams in crazy cycles, even ridiculously higher. I've heard 800, 900. Like you could have heart attacks that range eventually because the plaque build up. And watching your blood get too thick. Any fighters out there that do watch this, test your hemoglobin, test your blood thickness. Donate blood. If you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, or if you manage to have a TUE, whatever, don't let your blood get too thick, because that means plaque buildup means heart attack. We see these guys die at 45 that have been in pro wrestling and fighting and stuff, whatever, football. They're doing a lot of other stuff, but a lot of times could it be because of all the cycling off and on, which probably isn't good, or just long time ridiculous use? Yeah. So especially if you're cycling, bad. If you're doing huge amounts, bad. Guys, check and even just men in general, guys, get your hemoglobin checked. I just donated blood. It's a good thing to do anyway, but you don't want it to get too thick. You don't want it to get too high. Okay? There's another rant by me. But anyway, guys, I hope you're kind of enjoying this and kind of understanding what it's like. My opinions of it, I've been around a long time. Do I think, a lot of guys, back then I was naive, and a lot of the rooms I was training, I was naive, and now later on in life as people have retired, and people are like, you didn't know you were on Team Steroid? I didn't. I was naive. I mean, a couple people I knew, maybe one guy popped and a couple other guys, and when one guy's only like 183, 185 pounds and I was 202, and they were like fucking just throwing me around and had ridiculous cardio and aggressiveness and angry and lean and ripped. I think some of those guys popped for Winstrol later and testosterone and stuff like that. So yeah, do people use it? Yeah. Is the testing way better than used to? Yeah, I don't know all about it. Do I know people were always, whatever? Yeah. Blast cruising, guys. Blast cruising is when you're on TRT, or basically testosterone flies. TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, and in the summertime you want to look out on the beach, older guys go on a blast for whatever amount of time, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, which is kind of like a cycle, because they don't need to do PCT barely or not at all, because their testes are shut down anyway from long testosterone use after year and year and year being on replacement therapy. So sometimes they blast to look at the beach, or maybe guys are basically on testosterone all year long, maybe cycling off just before a fight and stuff like that, and they blast a huge amount because they decided it was time to kind of off season or break because you got an injury, stack on a lot of mass and power, which I talked about before. So guys, we're kind of, and even in the TUE, even Dana once kind of mentioned it, like he had just heard about blast cruising. You can be blasting up until when you're getting tested, and then you drop back down. So you're getting the advantages early on in camp, and this coming down to your allowed levels at fight time, and some guys got busted because they miscalculated it, right? So they still had above their TE ratio or above, like total testosterone, like I propose. I propose you do that total testosterone, and if you're above the total testosterone, no matter what it is, then you can test for what it is. So allow synthetic. I don't care if a guy's 18 and super stud and he's at top of range, or if a guy is 45 like Dan Henderson and needs it, and he used to have a TUE, so an older guy could naturally just need it, guys. Or anyone that had one testicle or got kneed in the nuts too hard. There's other reasons, or pituitary damage, a growth on their pituitary, a tumor. Happens in combat sports, my friends. I know about people that have tumors they don't tell other people they got, okay? So, anyway, I don't care if it's natural or if it's unnatural. If you're young and it's natural, if you're whatever, I say you should be allowed to use synthetic testosterone and just not go above that physiological range, or only a certain percentage. And if you're as long as you're getting tested frequently and randomly, and definitely at fight time and a month out and a week out and whatever they decide, it's a level playing field then. It's a level playing field then. Okay, and then guys will maybe stop doing all the crazy stuff as long as they know they can train like a friggin' beast. Not beast like one guy who suddenly got 3 high kick knockouts that never did before. In super beast mode. Super beast mode would be like if I said 1,000 was top range, he was probably at 2,500. Okay, there's certain people that obviously they're like way super physiological range, Superman range. You feel pretty damn good if you're at top of range anyway, and if you're a little bit above range, that's what pro athletes should probably be allowed to be. Should you be way, way, way above that allowed? No, because then we're talking hidden damage and brain damage and stuff. But should a 45-year-old veteran of the sport be able to hit as hard as a 18-year-old and have some of that endurance and stuff? I say, yeah. Does he have an unfair advantage because of being in the sport a long time? I guess that's debatable. Yeah, sure, you got skills and knowledge, but speed doesn't really get affected. You're still plodding and slow compared to a 20-year-old zipping in and out doing some neo striking. Anyway, guys, my punishment I would recommend in a case like John Jones, unless it's totally proven tainted supplement and all that. I don't like 2-year bans. I don't like 4-year bans. I don't like 5-year crazy bans for weed, and I definitely don't like lifetime bans on Vanderlei Silva and the misuse and abuse of power that has happened. Do I think there should be a ban? Yeah. I would say in his case, I would say probably 15 months. Why that? Because some guys take 1 year off anyway between fights if they make enough money, like champions do. So you want to make sure it's some kind of punishment, which hurts their pocketbook. If you can't fight enough, and you have a certain limited window of time of age for MMA, then I would say that you have to punish them somewhat. Do I not want to see a guy for 2 or 3 years and changes the whole division, everything? No. Not on like the first offense, okay? First offense for steroids. I don't care if a guy pops for weed, and I kind of care if they pop for cocaine or other stimulants before, but it's not really the same thing. So I say like 15 months would be fair in my opinion. Should if that was the case, say like Brock pops for obvious PCT drugs or for steroids or testosterone or something. I think the win bonus, depending on their contracts, maybe not the percentage point if they got a percentage point, but at least their win bonus or their total amount of money. So like win bonus is usually 50%, like 100% extra. So if you're an 8 and 8 fighter, or a 12 and 12 fighter, or 25 and 25, or 250 and 250,000. So, that extra amount that they got for winning against you when they shouldn't have, maybe because of drugs that they took, that win bonus should go to the person that lost, or 40% of their total payout, because some guys get paid just 500,000 flat or whatever, or 40% to the opponent. And then I say 10% to USADA or the regulatory body. In this case, maybe NSEC and or USADA, whoever is really decided. In the law, I guess the commissioning body can take up to all that USADA could take. I believe they could take it and put it towards testing fees. Like the UFC could take the money and then they got to give it to USADA, I think. I'm not sure exactly how that works. They could take $2.5 million of Brock's money and make basically the year of USADA taken care of. Should it be that much? If you were doing the cheap total testosterone test, then come in with the you tested. Now we're going to test your urine, your blood, your CRIR test. I believe that's what it is. Do all the extensive, expensive tests on the guys that popped. Because you don't care what just do the total testosterone. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know how you would hide that. If it was random testing, I don't know how you would hide that. If it was random testing, I don't know how. If it wasn't random and you knew exactly when, just fight time, you could manipulate it certain ways, especially if you were a fatter guy and then cutting weight, and water weight and stuff. And then if you IV'd on top of it and got away with the IV, and you didn't see the hole and wherever, it could go anywhere. But if you were randomly tested, I don't see how guys would take that risk. I would not take that risk. Every guy would have to figure out, do I take 140 or 180 milligrams of testosterone per week? And some guy's going to go, oh man, I'm smart. If I do, and they got the money, if I do 2 times a week, it's better and I get less estrogen anyway. If you do 2 times a week subcutaneously into the fat instead of intramuscular 1 time a week, which has been common forever. Or, maybe guys are like, I can use testosterone suspension every 2 days. Could you do that? Yeah. Is it more expensive? Probably. Could you get away with slightly higher more? Not if it's random. Not really. I mean, I guess you can inject at like midnight, and who soon they usually come not till like 5 in the morning. Maybe, but like the levels you're playing with, if someone took all that time to cheat, it's going to be like 50 to 100 total testosterone points. It's not going to be getting away with 2,500. Getting away with 2,000 total testosterone, getting away with like 3 times normal range that people have gotten away with. It's not going to be that. It's going to be a slight deviation, even with cheating, I think. So, think about it's cheap test, it's a cheap way to go, and then guy goes over it, you test them under everything under the sun and do the expensive test. Guys, that's it. Again, Brock and John Jones and everybody, they deserve their day in court. They deserve given some, especially in Brock's case, at least until now. I'm not going to go on one person's word, even if they're a journalist, because someone said so. Well, someone said so. I don't trust person if in a place of power that said so when they're not supposed to say so. There's rights and HIPAA laws for a reason. So those guys should be friggin' fired if they are. Until it's time, until the commission goes, we waited our 3-week waiting period and did a initial review before the official review and the chance for lawyers and all that. They shouldn't be releasing stuff until like they're supposed to, and they say, hey, we as a group, whether that's USADA or NSEC or KSEC or whoever, we are not, or WADA, whatever, whoever the organization and the governing bodies are, they shouldn't release that. I don't care who it is. That's private information. The fighters do right away some of that. I said that. But anyway, guys, I'm just saying, no one get too mad at me. I'm just saying it how I see it. Do I buy tainted supplement defense? In most cases, absolutely not. Could it possibly happen? Yeah, possibly. Like Romero got kind of away with it, but still a 6-month suspension, I believe. They kind of bought his story. And maybe it was something weird. I don't know what he tested positive for. It could have been. There's definitely like other stuff. Is definitely sometimes put into supplements that are like androstenodines and stuff like that. They're put in a supplement still illegally because it's not regulated. And then someone at the gym goes, no, this stuff really works. And when it works a little bit versus working nothing at all, you can make more money with your company by adding some of those supplements in. That can happen if it was at a place in China or India or Pakistan and it was mixed together. Could it be on the same assembly line, the same mixing vat and whatever? Yeah, it could happen. Do I believe pro athletes are, nah, come on. Not usually, but you have your right to try and prove it. You have a right to try and prove yourself, sure. So, guys, anyway, UFC on Fox 20 this Saturday, the 23rd. Holly Holm versus Shevchenko. This should be an awesome striking battle. Looking forward to it. Gilbert Melendez coming back off of his suspension for, I believe, either synthetic testosterone in his system or for higher ratio, TE ratio, or for being over a limit. Wasn't exactly too clear on that. Anyway, taking on Barboza. Edson Barboza spinning heel kick. Anyway, spinning hook kick. Guys, I've babbled a lot. Pancrase 279 after it. Stay up late, throw a party if you're in the West Coast. Pancrase 279 should be off the hook. anyway, that's kind of my knowledge of things. I used to be really unknowledgeable about this, guys. Don't make assumptions about me. When people started, I worked in media and been working in media and doing interviews and stuff, as you see down there. And so when people started getting TUEs, I started to like really look into it and study it. And I'm not an expert, but I think I know more than most people, and hopefully now you do too. And anyway, you should have learned about SERMs and AIs, and definitely about letrozole and how strong that is, even in the slightest amount. And so if you took it by accident for a few days, even in the slightest amount, you'd probably know that, in my opinion. And I think that is it. Please subscribe. And Chad Mendes just got popped and punished for 2 years for taking GHRP6. He's accepting that punishment without any kind of fight, which is good on him. Taking a peptide, growth hormone releasing hexapeptide or peptide, GHRP6. That's something that basically tricks your own body to produce growth hormone. Now, it's not the same as taking growth hormone and really like trying to cheat by taking exogenous growth hormone. Not quite the same in my book. Punishment probably should be more like a year, or if there's a ton of it in the system or extenuating circumstances, maybe 15 months in my opinion, not necessarily 2 years, which would be the same as if I did a full cycle trying to cheat with 2 or 3 steroids plus PCT, anti-estrogen, Sonnen AI added in, and HCG, It's not quite the same as like you got popped doing a whole cycle and PCT and all kinds of 5 or 6 things in your system. So I think that should be a little less of a harsher thing, unless there's like a ridiculous amount in a system. I don't know if they can tell that by the test. There's usually 2 tests, different ways of testing for growth hormone. Growth hormone is one of those things that the tests are difficult. It's hard to tell because the regular levels in your system can fluctuate, are very different from person to person. So they're trying to test for it, to test like markers over time to see if there's fluctuations and hints in the body that something's up. Of course, I've been doing this for a while now in the Olympics, and hopefully getting better at it. I think people in MMA have gotten away with using growth hormone for a long, long time, even before we heard about growth hormone. There are certain I highly suspect, and others in the know in the game like highly suspect that they were way ahead of the game more to using testosterone and growth hormone, and stuff like that. So a lot of people like Mirko Krokop, suspended for growth hormone, but that's because he admitted, just came out and said that he did it for an injury when he was getting tested. He's like, well, I took growth hormone because I'm hurt. And it can help you heal. So, anyway, guys, there's that on Chad Mendes. Emick Meek, who is about to debut in the UFC, got pulled because in the questionnaire, or he basically came out and said, I did something in a hospital that wasn't allowed. Now, maybe he was on something that wasn't allowed. Maybe it was simply an IV. We don't know. All we know is he's not allowed to fight. UFC's imposing, good on them, that he has to go through a 4-month testing process until he's able to debut in the UFC, which he was going to do because he KO'd Rosemar Polaris. So, that might be something small. Let's not badmouth him. Maybe it was something big. We really don't know. We probably will not know. Interesting. Chael is up in just 2 days. Chael is allowed to fight again. Nick Diaz is up in a week. So both Nick Diaz and Chael Sonnen, their suspensions are up and are able to fight again. That is very interesting, especially since, as you see in my Chael interview, that's already like 4,000 views in just a couple days. I did a couple days ago with Chael Sonnen at the Submission Underground event. We got into talking about Clomid, Novadex, and stuff. He's looking small. Now, he was like, at the end of the video, show me grappling with him a year ago. I was 218 then. He was 250 or 252 then. I believe he was a little over 250. He was a big boy then. Mostly because he just 3 months prior had his first kid and, hadn't been training and gaining weight with a wife and stuff like that. I'm sure, through the pregnancy, as it happens when, married guys, like sympathy with. He looked like 200 to 205 pounds if you see me sitting next to him. Now, unfortunately, I've gone up in weight. I'm like 236 now. So it looks a lot different, but he's looking small, and that's interesting because if he was going to fight again, I bet he would go back down to middleweight. I don't know if he has, seems to be doing the father thing, but he has been out there doing publicity tours and doing a lot of stuff. So keep that in mind, guys. Maybe I'm breaking that possibility. Condit just got pulled from the 202 card. Condit Maya just got moved back. Maybe UFC is going to announce something big. Maybe he has plans to go back and do a big UFC fight soon. Fight Bisping again. That was a close fight. Even though it's supposed to be Dan Henderson, I don't know, getting that miss, fight a number one contender fight Nick Diaz even at 85, fight Anderson Silva a third time, anything here is possible in the crazy world of MMA. Want to talk about some of the drugs that guys pop for most often in the past, and then I want to talk about HGH, which we've already talked about a bit. Nandrolone, commonly known as DECA. Guys pop for that a lot. It's mostly to heal, mostly because they have an injury and they want to get healed. Problem with DECA is it can stay in your system for a year, even longer if you're high body fat. Maybe that's why we've seen a lot of guys pop for it. Jostanolone, also known as Mesteron. That can lean you out and it has no aromatization. So you create nothing to estrogen with that particular steroid, unlike other steroids. So that's mild androgenic effects. You usually mix that with testosterone and other stuff. So it makes the other stuff you're on a cycle better. That's why guys use it. And you see guys on that and something else a lot of times when they pop. Boldenone, also known as Equipoise. That's the horse steroid that leans you out and gets you ripped. Same as the other one, Stanozolol or Winstrol. Talked about Winstrol before. It is known to dry you out. That's how people refer to it. It's actually another mechanism that makes you achy in your joints. But I have read studies about it actually drying out ligaments. So I believe that you could say a lot of guys get injured perhaps because of using Winstrol, Stanozolol. And for a grappler, that is just not a good. That makes you strong and lean, and when you're trying to weight cut and get to a weight class and be as strongest as possible, that's why guys are doing things like Equipoise and Winstrol. But I think, people say that maybe it's not the best for fighters, even though a lot of fighters have been popped for it. Guys, HGH, like I said, a lot of people have probably used it. Guys are always going to get around test by doing new designer steroids and peptides that they don't even know to test for those metabolites yet. So there's always ways of beating the system. Defense, body armor always comes after offense. You got to put in a new strike armor plate when the 5.7 millimeters Steyr pistols were coming out, right? So defense is always behind offense, basically. So offense here being the steroids and defense being the test. Now I'd like to talk just a little bit about, let's throw out, even though guys are going to hate me for this, the multi-offenders, the worst offenders in MMA for getting popped for multiple drugs and steroids and getting popped multiple times. By far, the worst offender, and this is not because of my personal past with this guy, by far, everyone says the worst offender is Josh Barnett. Josh Barnett popped at UFC 32 for 2 different steroids. He merely got a warning because there really wasn't official testing back then. Popped at UFC 36 when he won the title over Randy Couture, so that should have been no contest, and this title never should have been. He shouldn't be referred to as a former UFC heavyweight champion, in my opinion, for 3 steroids, Boldenone, Nandrolone, and another one I don't even know what it is, Fleximestorone. So first time 2 steroids. A few UFC later, wins the title, 3 steroids. Then he goes to Japan, stays out of the U.S., doesn't fight in the U.S. for 4.5 years. Then he pops and causes the end of Affliction 3 for a third time for Jostanolone. Now, that caused the cancellation. He was supposed to fight Fedor, Affliction 3, that caused the cancellation, the end of Affliction. 23 other fighters were supposed to get paid on that card. All those fighters at Affliction were testing their free marketability, and we were getting the real worth of fighters, which if you see what the UFC just sold for $4.5 billion, the fighters themselves are worth more than they get paid, in a lot of people's opinion, and you could definitely say that. Josh Barnett ruined that for everybody to test your free marketability and another organization that was willing to pay for you. That hurt the entire sport, in my opinion. He popped 3 times for, 6 different steroids. Possibly. I don't know what the first 2 steroids were. Maybe they were some of the same ones, but he popped a lot. Not only that, at Affliction 3, he said, nah, you got to test my B sample. B sample came back positive. Then he's supposed to go in front of the California State Athletic Commission and then request a extension, and then another extension, and then another extension, 3 extensions, a couple because of him, one because of his lawyer couldn't make it supposedly. So 3 extensions. So the 4th time he's supposed to show up for the hearing, he no-shows it. He's in Japan, says his manager or girlfriend, and won't be back till later that day. Didn't know he had to be there. KSX says, no, we've been notifying you. We've been sending you letters. We've been notifying you had to be there. So Josh Barnett, worst offender, and yet now he's still fighting. Where is he fighting? Places like Japan, usually. Do they have their own commission? Kind of, for fighter safety, not really for testing. Okay. They may have judges and referees and, some stuff like that, but they don't, does UFC, when you do overseas stuff? Yeah, they are able to oversee it however much or however little that they choose. They were in Brazil for a while, and Brazil got CAB or whatever. They got their own established, but, when they go to like Australia and stuff like that, they've often acted as their own, commissioning body, basically. So, Josh Barnett, if I was fighting, you were scheduled to fight a guy like Josh Barnett, you'd be like, yo, how many times have you tested him? I think he was only tested once recently. I can't find, I've tried to go through it to find all the random tests that have been done since USADA. I've been saying USADA maybe like that. Josh Barnett, the worst offender ever. Then you got to either go with Chael Sonnen or Robert Drysdale being the next worst offender. We'll talk about Chael Sonnen. Able to fight again soon, possibly. Suspension's up in 2 days. UFC 117. PED. Turns out it was 4 times the allowable testosterone to epitestosterone ratio. Almost 17 times normal human being levels testosterone, epitestosterone. Because where that fight took place, they were allowing a 4-to-1, not the natural 1-to-1 ratio. Because, we let athletes get away with a little bit, and athletes are a little bit superhuman. So almost 17-to-1 ratio, 16.9-to-1 T to E ratio. That was for the first Anderson fight, where he just punched every second of the fight and had endless energy and got caught last minute. Now, why did he have such endless energy? Well, he was obviously on a lot of synthetic testosterone. And he was pulled from 175. First pops for clomiphene and anastrozole. We've talked about Clomid a lot in this video. We've talked about anastrozole, which is Dex, Arimidex. That's the other name for it. Yeah, anastrozole is the other name for Arimidex. Dex is the most common AI. Anyway, then it comes out, whether through testing, through a second random test that they gave him, or through his acknowledgments. It depends who you listen to. You're not really sure. Can't really find exactly. Did he pop for 4 things? Some stories say that. Did he pop for 5? Even recently himself said, yeah, I got popped for 5, but, all the stuff you didn't test me for. He's made jokes like that, which are probably serious. Probably 5 things in his system. Clomiphene, anastrozole, EPO, which we talked about, HCG, which we've talked a little about getting the testes started, and HGH. Now, 3 of those he could say because, well, I was sort of on a TUE, but not officially on a TUE. It wasn't granted, but I thought it was allowed, and that whole thing that he tried to pull, saying that he disclosed it when he really didn't, never got it, whatever. 3 of those because maybe he wanted to make a baby. He did shortly thereafter have his first child, so hey, that HCG maybe works and got the boys going again. EPO and HGH, however, no, that ain't to make a baby. That is for performance against Anderson Silva. And when you're on all 5, boy, what a badass performance. That was like a Ferrari there with high-octane fuel. He had high-octane fuel in his system. So notable is he failed 3 times. He failed 117. He failed before 175 in a random test, and he failed again a second random test for 175 when his opponent was switched to Vitor Belfort. Okay, guys. So Chael's had a lot of different stuff in his system. Well, it looks like 6 things if you count synthetic testosterone in extremely high ratios. So he's popped for 6 different items in 3 separate tests. But very 2. Josh Barnett's only really 3 striker at 3 different separate occasions for, in my opinion, real PEDs, not marijuana or something like that. Josh Barnett is by far the worst. And then I'm not going to name the one offers. That would take forever. We're going to name the 2 strike. It should be 3 strikes, you're out. You're out of the sport, in my opinion. 3 strikes, you're out. Josh Barnett should be gone. Out. These other guys, they pop again, they should be out. 3 strikes, you're out. That's American way. Next worst up is probably, not based on what we think. Like, we think Overeem, but he's only popped once. We think Vitor, he's only kind of popped twice, but TUEs, and there's some other things in there. Bigfoot Silva, Robert Drysdale. Let's go with Robert Drysdale as the next bad guy. 2 elevated testosterone TDE ratios. 19.4 to 1. Popped the first time. Then requested a TUE and got denied. Pulled out of a scheduled fight right there. That's very, very suspicious. Sorry, Robert. I know I met you in Japan. You were cool. I still would love to train with you, but these are the facts. Popped twice and a suspicion. Okay. And then popped again later on with a 12 to 1 ratio. Now, most states allow 4 to 1. Nevada allows 6 to 1. That's crazy. Again, most humans have 1 to 1. Okay, maybe an athlete a 2 to 1. They allow 4 to 1 over 6 to 1. A lot of synthetic testosterone was being allowed in the systems until now. I think they're doing more serious tests to actually really test the guys for synthetic testosterone. That's why you got a guy getting popped for metabolites like Mendes, who just came back and is cleared and is fighting this Saturday. Is just simply using synthetic testosterone, which in my opinion is bad if it's come back 20 to 1 or, my God, 40 to 1. I think it was Brian Bowles. And stuff like that. But, if you're just, kind of using this, not quite as bad as using all these androlones and angelones, baldinones, and all that. Antonio Bigfoot Silva. First time was for the host steroid boldenone, also known as equipoise. Talked about that. Second time was elevated testosterone, but that was while he had a TUE. And, the guy has, or at least had, I think he had it removed now. He had he's a giant, kind of a giant. He's like a mini giant. He has a growth tumor on his pituitary gland, or did. First time was definitely, he deserves punishment for that. Second time, did he probably intend to? Yeah, maybe. Can we give him a little benefit of the doubt more than most people? Yeah, since he suffers from gigantism. Yes. If I was Mark Hunt and I just, he went to a 5-round war getting his head bashed in by a heavyweight, and then you see the difference when he's no longer with elevated testosterone in their second fight, and then poor Mark Hunt, Brock Lesnar just got 2, failed tests. I'd be really pissed if I was Mark Hunt, and obviously Mark Hunt is very pissed right now. So, I'll show you guys my shirt. Anyway, Chemo Leopoldo, twice for the same drug, Winstrol. Okay. Stanozolol is the correct name. Marketed as Winstrol originally, known as Winstrol. Vitor Belfort, really only popped twice. One for 4-hydroxy testosterone, the next time for elevated testosterone. Stephan Bonner, first time for boldenone, second time against Anderson Silva, years later for drostanolone. So Stephan Bonner, yeah, and then he retired. So that 1-year suspension didn't mean a whole lot. Actually, was offered to fight Stephan Bonner a long time ago, but it was only 2 weeks' notice. I said, I'll think about it. Let me look him up. Once I looked him up and saw that he was 6'4", and I said no to it. And then I don't know, either right after or right before, I think I had kind of seen his fight against Vitor Belfort in Brazil. Or not Vitor Belfort, against Lyoto Machida, excuse me. So I was like, that tall with no time to train. I'm very short. I'm just shy of 5'11". I turned it down. If it was 60 weeks notice and I could have found a training partner, I would have taken it. So unfortunately, I've had a lot of instances way back in the NHB days where I could have fought some of these really famous, guys that became really famous in the UFC. But it was always as the underdog, the last minute, or they pulled shady shit and stuff like that. These are the worst offenders. Oh, the last worst two-time offender that I could find was Nathan Marquardt. First time for Nandrolone, and the second time for Elevated T, claiming he was on, with no TUE, on TRT, and switched from pills to shots, and that's why. And they were pretty pissed and suspended him, and I think he got it way reduced or the suspension lifted when he's like, yeah, but that was before the fight, and I would have been tapered off by the fight time. My levels would have dropped back down. Possible. Perhaps. Other people have kind of the same excuse like Vitor. Like, well, I usually shoot twice a week, but I was going, I came to Las Vegas for a trip, so I did a whole week shot. I can say I know people that have personally done that too. If you're going overseas, is it a lot easier to be kind of, do a whole shot or even a 2-week shot, even though that screws your estrogen up and stuff like that in your whole system, and go super physiologic? Or do you really want to take have to be pre-filled syringes and go through TSA and get screwed by airport security, and possibly go through stuff and having to prove that it's prescribed and all that, or you got to take a whole bottle that might break, and then you're completely screwed if that's your only. A doctor's not going to go, oh yeah, you broke it, I'll give you more. No, not a good doctor anyway. They're going to be really worrisome about that. So, some of these excuses people use, they might be true, usually not, but they might be true. So guys, those are the worst offenders. I needed to add this. I babbled again way too long. I hope you enjoyed it, and there probably should be a 3-strike, you're out rule. As far as PEDs, obviously, marijuana shouldn't really be punished. Now I think they're only saying if it's fight day, basically, in your system. The only time I think it should have been punished was the one time Nick Diaz against Gomi, because his levels were so high of THC. I could believe the argument that is a pain, could help lessen the effects of pain. Plus, I think it does possibly give guys like him a grappling advantage against, at least not against top-level talent. You can stay chill and pull off a Gopa Plata when you're stoned out of your gourd, because he said he ate brownies, instead of usually smoking like his other times. He had ingested, so your levels of THC are way higher, because they were off the roof for that. So should he be suspended for that particular fight? Yeah. Should the later 5-year suspension happen? No. Now I think most commissions have kind of changed it where it's like, we don't care if you smoke 2 weeks out. We care if it's in your system day of the fight. 3 strikes, you're out. If it's anything that increases testosterone or performance as far as EPO or HGH, if it's anything like that, I think there should be a 3 strikes, you're out rule. First time mandatory, it shouldn't be 2 years. It should probably be 15 months, in my opinion. And then extenuating circumstances, lower or higher. Second should be worse, and 3rd strike should be you're out. So, if I was fighting any of those guys, Bigfoot Silva, Josh Barnett, Chael Sonnen, Stephan Bonner, Vitor Belfort, or even guys we suspect that's never popped or only popped once, like Alistair Overeem, I'm going to be like, hey, USADA, you're going to go test him, not, 4 times. You're going to test him 8, 9 times before. And it seems they're actually doing that on their own. You can see certain people are, everyone's getting tested a lot, and certain people are getting tested even more, and that's a good thing. And the biggest guys in the weight classes should probably be tested more, and stuff like that, and champions and whatnot. So anyway, guys, that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Now you understand a lot more about all this stuff. I knew quite a bit of it, but I gave you some of the technical names, and the more you know. I'm Dan the Wolfman, and I will catch you on the flip side.